In 2021, 15 volunteers walked into a cave and agreed to lose track of time. There would be no clocks, no sunlight, no phones, and no outside contact. Their mission was simple and terrifying: live underground for 40 days. Scientists wanted to know what happens to the human mind when time disappears. Without sunrise or sunset, the brain loses its most ancient anchor. At first, everything felt like an adventure. They organized meals, exercise routines, and personal projects. But within days, something strange began to happen. Sleep cycles started drifting out of sync. Some stayed awake for 20 hours, others slept for 14. Without light cues, the body clock began to unravel. Days felt shorter, then longer, then meaningless. One participant believed only 23 days had passed. In reality, it had already been 30. Time inside the cave was no longer universal. Each mind had created its own private calendar. Isolation began to change their perception of reality itself. Some reported deeper sleep than they had ever experienced. Others struggled with confusion and emotional swings. Yet no one asked to leave, because something unexpected was happening. Without clocks, stress levels began to drop. Freed from schedules, their days felt strangely peaceful. In darkness, they found a different rhythm. When they finally emerged, 40 real days had passed. Many believed it had only been 35. Their brains had quietly rewritten time. And the experiment proved something unsettling. Time is not just measured by clocks, it is constructed by the brain.
At the southernmost tip of the world, a single research station sits surrounded by endless ice. In 2020, one scientist stayed behind alone for 60 days while the others left. There was no way to leave. Blizzards made travel impossible. Every day, the silence pressed in harder than the cold. Sleep and wake cycles blurred under artificial lighting. Without voices or human contact, even small noises sounded deafening. Routine became both lifeline and prison. Every window framed nothing but ice and sky. Days stretched into nights without difference. Loneliness became a tangible presence. To pass time, the mind began inventing patterns and rituals. Each meal, every step outside became monumental. Isolation made tiny successes feel like victories. Sleep deprivation caused strange dreams and hallucinations. Sometimes they imagined voices from the wind. The station became a world unto itself. Outside, Antarctica showed no mercy. At the southernmost tip of the world, a single research station sits surrounded by endless ice. There are no cities beyond it, no roads, no rescue just over the horizon, only wind, only white, only distance measured in thousands of empty miles. In 2020, one scientist stayed behind alone for 60 days while the others left. The aircraft disappeared into the pale sky, shrinking into nothing, and with it, the last easy connection to the outside world. There was no way to leave. Blizzards made travel impossible. Temperatures plunged low enough to freeze fuel lines. Runways vanished beneath drifting snow. Even if help had been needed, none could arrive. Every day, the silence pressed in harder than the cold. It wasn't the peaceful kind of silence. It was heavy, expansive, absolute, the kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. Sleep and wake cycles blurred under artificial lighting. Without sunrise or sunset, time stopped behaving normally. The body asked for rest at the wrong hours. Dreams slipped into waking moments. Without voices or human contact, even small noises sounded deafening. The hum of generators, the click of cooling metal, the scrape of boots on steel floors. Each sound echoed longer than it should have. Routine became both lifeline and prison. Morning checks, system diagnostics, meal preparation, log entries, repeat. Structure kept the mind steady, but repetition magnified isolation. Every window framed nothing but ice and sky. No movement, no trees, no distant lights, just horizon dissolving into white emptiness. Days stretched into nights without difference. Shadows barely shifted. Clouds moved too slowly to mark passing hours. Time became abstract. Loneliness became a tangible presence. Not an emotion, but something that felt physical, like another occupant inside the station. To pass time, the mind began inventing patterns and rituals. Each meal, every step outside became monumental. Isolation made tiny successes feel like victories. A repaired instrument, a cleared hatch, a stabilized power reading. Small wins carried disproportionate relief. Sleep deprivation caused strange dreams and hallucinations. Sometimes they imagined voices from the wind. The station became a world unto itself. It had its own climate, its own rhythm, its own fragile ecosystem powered by generators and willpower. Outside, Antarctica showed no mercy. Winds exceeding 100 miles per hour, temperatures capable of freezing exposed skin in under a minute, storms that erased visibility completely. Inside, the mind struggled to map time or reality. Days felt longer, yet vanished quickly in memory. Events blurred together, moments repeated. Small tasks became monumental tests of will. Standing up when motivation collapsed, cooking when appetite disappeared, logging data when concentration slipped. Days without sunlight affected mood, energy, and memory. Melatonin cycles destabilized, cognitive sharpness dulled, emotions flattened, then intensified without warning. Hours blended into one continuous frozen monotony. The station lights flickered softly, machines hummed on schedule, but outside, nothing changed. Occasionally, wildlife appeared beyond the ice, tiny reminders of life. A distant seal shifting across snow, a lone seabird cutting through the wind, proof that something else still existed. The mind alternated between hyperfocus and despair. 1 hour intensely productive, the next staring at a wall for minutes that felt like hours. Meals became routine, then ritual, then obsession. Measurements precise, portions controlled, small sensory comforts stretched for as long as possible. When a storm trapped the station for a week, everything froze. Snow piled against doors, wind battered metal walls without pause. The outside world vanished completely. Silence became deafening even inside the station. Because once the storm stopped, the quiet returned stronger than before. But eventually the storm cleared and normal light returned. A thin line of brightness touched the horizon, the first hint that cycles still existed beyond isolation. 60 days alone had changed perception, memory, and mind. The concept of before felt distant. The outside world felt theoretical. Time was no longer measured by hours, but by survival, by functioning systems, by mental stability, by getting through another rotation of artificial light. The station had endured. The mind had endured. But endurance leaves marks, and the experiment showed the extreme limits of human isolation. Not just how cold the planet can become, but how quiet the mind can grow when there is nothing left to reflect against.
Beneath the Arctic Ocean, a research submarine moves silently under a ceiling of solid ice. Above them was not open water, but miles of frozen ocean locked in permanent winter. The mission was simple on paper: collect data, map the ice shelf, and return in 3 weeks. But on day 12, everything changed. A violent tectonic shift fractured the ice above, collapsing their planned surfacing zone. The path back to open water disappeared under shifting plates of frozen pressure. When they tried to rise, the hull met solid resistance. There was no crack, no weak point, no exit. The submarine was trapped beneath the ice. Communication with headquarters weakened as geomagnetic interference disrupted signals. Static replaced voices, then silence replaced static. They were alone. Inside the vessel, air recyclers hummed steadily, unaware of the new reality. Oxygen was limited but manageable if systems held. Food was rationed carefully. Water was recycled meticulously. Every calculation now revolved around endurance. The captain ordered a search for thinner ice. The submarine descended slightly, then moved forward slowly, sonar scanning the ceiling above. But the ice shelf was thicker than predicted. In some places, it stretched more than 30 meters down. They could not punch through it. They could only search. Day 15 arrived without sunlight, without fresh air, without certainty. Circadian rhythms began to slip. Artificial lighting replaced day and night. Sleep became fragmented. Dreams became vivid. The metal walls felt closer. Every sound carried further in the enclosed steel cylinder. The creak of the hull under pressure, the distant churn of ballast adjustments, the soft click of relays switching circuits. Small noises became impossible to ignore. On day 18, condensation began forming in unusual patterns along the ceiling. Humidity levels were rising. The air felt heavier. Technicians adjusted filtration systems. Power reserves were stable, but not infinite. Batteries required careful cycling. Any mistake would cost them time. Time was now the most valuable resource on board. On day 22, sonar detected a potential opening. Excitement spread through the crew. The submarine maneuvered upward cautiously. The hull rose slowly toward what looked like thinner ice. Then the sonar reading shifted. The opening collapsed in a cascade of falling fragments. Ice slammed downward in the darkness above. The submarine descended quickly to avoid impact. Hope dissolved in seconds. No one spoke for several minutes. By day 25, conversations grew shorter. Voices softened. Arguments flared over small decisions. Stress found cracks in discipline. The psychological strain began to rival the environmental danger. Carbon dioxide levels crept higher despite filtration. Headaches became common. Fatigue deepened. Focus required effort. One crew member reported hearing tapping sounds from outside the hull. There was nothing there. The Arctic was empty. The mind, deprived of change, began to create it. Day 30 marked the halfway point of their remaining projected oxygen supply. The captain gathered the crew. Rations were reduced further. Movement was minimized to conserve energy. Even breathing felt strategic. Sonar sweeps continued in slow arcs beneath the ice ceiling. The submarine moved like an insect trapped beneath glass. Above them, the Arctic shifted unpredictably. Ice plates collided and separated with immense force. Pressure ridges formed in hours. Any thin patch they found could vanish by morning. On day 34, a power fluctuation plunged half the vessel into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on. Shadows stretched long across narrow corridors. For 20 seconds, the submarine felt like a coffin. Engineers restored the system, but something had changed. Fear was no longer theoretical. Day 38 brought another sonar anomaly. A narrow vertical fracture extended upward through the ice. It was unstable. It was shifting, but it was real. The submarine positioned carefully beneath it. Ballast tanks adjusted. The vessel rose centimeter by centimeter. Ice scraped along the hull. Metal groaned. Pressure alarms pulsed softly in the control room. The fracture narrowed, then widened slightly. The captain ordered full ascent. The submarine pushed upward with controlled force. The hull shuddered violently. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a cracking roar echoed through the water. Light pierced downward in a narrow beam. Natural light. The first in 38 days. The ice above fractured apart just enough. The submarine breached through shattered slabs into open Arctic air. Fresh wind struck the hull. Crew members shielded their eyes from the brightness. 47 days beneath the ice had ended. They had survived on calculation, discipline, and restraint. But when the hatch finally opened and cold Arctic air rushed inside, survival felt less like mathematics and more like something fragile that could have disappeared at any moment.